Hello again, Wired fam. What's going on? Hope y'all are doing well. Welcome to another Wired for Crappie Live. I am ready to go this evening. We got some good stuff to talk about. As you saw on the title for the live tonight, we're going to talk about jig heads. Okay, we're going to talk about the different weights of jig heads, the evolution of the jig head weights, kind of where, as crappie fishermen, a lot of us are at today. Okay, so it's really interesting to me to see kind of the transition from what weight jig heads we used to have to, or used to fish with, to the jig heads of today and what we fish with today. So we're here to talk about that tonight. And I want to know from you guys, what's your favorite jig head? What jig head do you typically tie on? What's your go-to jig head as far as weight? Not necessarily color or eye or no eye. I mean, we can get real deep into this. Shape, all this different stuff. So we can get really deep into jig heads. But we're here to talk about weights tonight. Jig head weights and how they relate to your crappie fishing and when to use certain weights, what weight to use in certain situations, and what is that go-to or that new go-to for most people as far as their jig head weight. Okay, so we're going to get into that tonight here in just a little bit. But first and foremost, I would like for you guys to drop me a comment, tell me hello, let me know where you're from when you get on. And I always like to say hello back to you guys, as I always say every show. So when you get on, drop me a hello in the comments. Let me know where you're from, what your home lake is. Like to see where all we're reaching out to. Okay, guys? So real quick, let's check on some people. See who all's on tonight. We got Crappie Kev from Ashburn, Virginia. What's going on? Nathan Wood. Hello, hello. We got Slab Happy Lures from Mossheim. Did I say that right? Mossheim, Tennessee. Mossheim. Chris Sims. What up, Chris? Chris, I got your text. If I need anything, I'll let you know, buddy. I appreciate you very much. James Williams from Saudi Daisy. Hope you're well. Yes, sir, we are. Donathan Brown from Lenore City. What's going on? Slab Happy 132nd. Virgil, hello, Matt. What's going on? Johnny Coots, good evening from Ringgold, Georgia. Wet West Virginia. Yeah, I tell you what, we're getting pounded with rain down here, too. It's rained several times this week. So, it's wet. It's wet down here. We got pounded last week. We got quite a bit of rain this week. It's been very wet, for sure. It's been a wet couple weeks. I'm ready for a break. I'm ready for some warm weather and a break. You know what I'm saying? All right, let's see. Brad, what's going on? Ty Cofelt, hello, hello. Jeffrey Smith, good evening from Rogersville. What's going on? Hey, look who it is. My own dad. What's up, Dad? What's up? Mr. Mike Zenas in the house from Albany. What's going on, man? My dad's in the house. This is the first live I've seen my dad on. Look at there. Alex Barnett from Kingsport. Let's see. Paul, good evening from Chattanooga. What's going on, Paul? Russell Odom, Lightwire Hooks. What's up, Russell? Hey, Russell, I got my order. Thank you very much. We're actually going to talk about them tonight. So, got my order from Lightwire. If you guys don't know who Lightwire Hooks is, you need to go check them out, because Lightwire Hooks, right back here over my shoulder, Mr. Lightwire Hooks. Mr. Russell is the new Mr. Lightwire Hooks. So, for those of you that don't know, Mr. Curtis Hobbs has owned and operated Lightwire Hooks for as many years as I can remember. I've been using his hooks for a decade, actually more than a decade, probably going on 15 years now. I've been getting hooks from Mr. Curtis. And Mr. Curtis has decided, and I hope it's okay that I mention this, but Mr. Curtis has decided that he is ready to slow down. He's ready to take a break. So, Mr. Russell with Lightwire Hooks, I appreciate the hooks, sir, very much. Check them out, guys. There's my June bug. I showed you guys that June bug the other night. We're going to talk about that. Not necessarily color, but we're going to talk about jig heads tonight. So I'm glad you're on, Russell. But yes, the Lightwire hooks are still being produced and still same quality as they have been for years and years. Looking forward to continuing getting those hooks. Okay. So let's see here. Steve from Maryland, what's going on? Chris, mostly 132nd, but I've been using heavier lately and like how fast the 3/16th in the quarter gets down to the fish. Jimmy Pratt, hello, Matt and Fishing Friends. What's going on? Randy Brim from Illinois, hello. Eric from Coreyton, hello, hello. Slab Happy, sup, Daddy Wired? What's going on? You're interrupting my Braves game. He said, yeah, well, Braves are going to win. You already know that. So turn it off and watch some crappie. Watch some crappie talk. All right. Awesome. Thank you. Go Braves. Lightwire hooks. It's myself and partner Derek Paget. Is that right? I'm pronounced that right? Hello, Matt from Arkansas. My go-to for the past year has been an ACC 3/16th aspirin, black and chartreuse. Just today I placed an order from Lightwire today for some of the ones you just got. Well, that's awesome. You're going to love them. And, let's talk a little bit about the evolution of the jig head and the jig head weight specifically. Okay. So for instance, when I started crappie fishing over a decade ago, and I mostly trolled, okay? I'm fidgeting. When I mostly trolled, this was pretty much the only box that I carried, okay? This right here has 16th ounce and 24th ounce jig heads in it, and it used to have 32nd ounce in it. I think it still does. Yeah, it does right here. So 30 seconds, okay? So we got 30 seconds, 24s, I'm backwards, remember, and 16ths. This is pretty much the only jig box I ever carried to go crappie fishing, period. I never used anything heavier than a 16th ounce. I would fish everything from docks to trolling. Well, let's start with first getting into crappie fishing. All I did was troll. All I did was long line troll. That's all I did. And I used pretty much 2 16th ounce jigs religiously. Okay. So really 16ths was about all I had. And then I realized in the spring I needed some lighter jig heads because the fish went shallow and I need to be able to fish shallower. So I went to 2 32nds. So introduction of the 32nd ounce jig. But never anything any heavier than a 16th ever. Okay. Then I started fishing. This is way, way before LiveScope. Way. So far before LiveScope, it ain't even funny, right? And I started fishing some docks, okay? Started shooting docks. Started fishing some offshore structure, some brush piles, lay downs, that sort of thing. And I realized, hey, if I went to a lighter jig, that 32nd ounce, I could shoot docks, present my bait to the fish for a longer period of time, and get a lot more bites on the fall. So, and as a matter of fact, since Mr. Mike is on here tonight, we actually went to Blackshear very early in my crappie fishing career and shot some docks. Really didn't shoot docks. We more or less casted docks, and it was kind of comical. So I don't remember what jig head we were using, but it was a lot heavier than a 32nd. I think we were throwing like quarters or eights or something around these docks, and we caught some crappie. We'd throw up in a boat slip and catch a crappie every once in a while, and we thought we were big stuff. It was like, hey, we're catching fish. So I don't remember how many. We came home with like maybe a dozen, 10, 12, something fish. I don't remember, but anyway, that was so early on. I had a 12-foot John boat with a 6-horse Evinrude trying to putt around a little lake and go crappie fishing. Those were the good days. That's when you put 3 gallons worth of gas in your boat. You don't have to fill it up for a month. You know what I'm saying? So, I actually only had 16ths and 32nds. Then the 24ths got introduced because I wanted to try to run another, or I just have another, because I'd run double jig rigs on my longline setup. And I wanted to have, the 32nds I could run 2 to 4 feet. And the 24ths I could do a double jig rig and run, 4 to 7 feet or 4 to 8 feet. And then 2 16ths I could run 8 to 12. So I kind of got to where I was using my jig head weight to dictate my depth when I was trolling. Okay. That was before I had a whole lot of expensive equipment and a whole lot of GPSs and a whole lot of trolling motors that have cruise control on them and hold you at a certain speed and all that good business. Okay. That was way before all that. So again, we're starting at the beginning and we're working through kind of everything that's went on in the last 10 years to get us to where we are today. Okay. So if you're a crappie fisherman that's just starting out, or you're a crappie fisherman that doesn't have all this expensive gear and doesn't have all these things that really help you be more effective, then there's some tricks to the trade. Okay. There's some tricks that you can use to be more effective with what you have currently and what you've got to go crappie fishing with, right? Old school, the old school way, like Ty says. Old school. They call me old school, and I'm fine with that. I'm old school at heart, and that's fine. I'm perfectly fine with that. So, again, like I was saying, if you're out there long line trolling and you're running that 0.8 to 1 mile an hour, or you're easing down the lake and you're running 2/16 or 2/24 or 2/32, you can vary your depth using those jig head weights, and you can be effective and catch fish at certain depths at certain times of the year when they're in those different depth ranges. Okay. If it's middle of spawn and people are catching them spawning, throw 2/32 on there and go find you some 6-8 foot water and go catch some fish. If it's pre-spawn and they're moving through the creek channels up into the back of the bays or whatever, tell her I'll get her some fish. We'll have to get some fish down there. That's for sure. Don't worry. We'll get some fish. So tell her you need to bring your butt up here and go fishing. That's what you need to tell her. All right. So you've got, again, you've got a way to vary your depth and present your bait in front of those fish using these different jig head weights. Okay. And, like I said, if it's pre-spawn and those fish are moving up and down the creek channels, working their way into the bays to spawn and working their way out after they've spawned, you can catch those fish with 2/16 jigs running 8 to 12 foot deep in the creek channels. Okay. Suspended fish that are moving around. So that's the way I learned to kind of crappie fish. And that's kind of all I needed was this right here. Okay. Then when I started shooting docks, I went to that 32nd ounce. That 32nd ounce allowed me to still be able to shoot a jig up under a dock. It had enough weight to it to shoot a jig, but it didn't have so much weight that it would fall past those fish to the point where they couldn't react to that jig. So when that jig gets up under that dock, it's falling maybe 6 inches a second, and they've got time to see that jig, decide to eat that jig, react to that jig, and strike. Okay. So if you're a dock shooter, you should probably be using a 32nd ounce jig. Okay. Some guys use a 64th even because it's that much lighter. But 32nd is pretty much, in my opinion, the right jig to use under docks. Okay. And I still use a 32nd ounce jig. Right here, I still use them under docks. If I'm going to shoot docks, I've got a 32nd tied on, period. Now, if I get on a dock where that 32nd just won't make it back to those fish, let's say I can, because we have LiveScope now. So let's say I can see those fish. I know those fish are sitting in that back corner, and I just can't quite get to them. I will put a 16th ounce on because I can shoot that 16th ounce further. It's at that point, inertia, right? So that 16th will go further in the 32nd. Not by much, but about 5-6 feet further. And I can get to some of those fish that are in the back of those docks, in those corners, in those deep, dark holes, okay? So that's kind of where I stayed, really, for many, many, many years. Started East Tennessee Crappie Club several years after, starting to crappie fish, and really never varied from that 16th ounce jig, okay? But then there came this point where I started fishing a lot more open water, and we still didn't have LiveScope, but I noticed that when we started fishing out deeper and deeper and deeper, and we started fishing out more open water type scenarios, okay, more brush piles and natural structure that were in open water. Again, don't have LiveScope yet, okay, that I could throw an 1/8 ounce jig. Okay, this is a box of 1/8 ounce. Everything in here is 1/8 ounce. Okay, this is all different kind of 1/8 ounce jigs right here. Most of them from Lightwire. All right. I noticed that if I could get out there and take an 1/8 ounce jig, okay, one, I didn't have to count my jig down as far or as much, okay, because that's back in the days where we counted a jig down. That's back in the days where you take that jig right there and you throw it over a brush pile, and a 1/16 falls a foot a second, roughly. An 1/8 ounce falls about 1.5 feet a second. Okay. Now, some people are going to say, well, wait a minute. That doesn't make sense because an 1/8 is twice a 1/16. Well, that's exactly right. But if you watch this jig, okay, and some people are going to say, well, how'd you figure that out? Well, it's real simple. If you're sitting in 10 foot of water, this is the old school way. Okay. I'm talking old school right now. We're going to get the LiveScope, but this is the old school stuff. So, if you're sitting in 10 feet of water and you take that 1/8 ounce jig and you cast it out and you count it down until it hits the bottom, then you divide it out, it's about 1.5 feet a second. It really doesn't fall 2 foot a second like you would think because it's an 1/8, not a 1/16. But you still got the buoyancy of that jig, that plastic that's on that end of it. And the plastic makes a difference too. If you use a big bodied plastic, a lot of times it won't fall as fast because it drags more than it falls than if you use a small, slender jig. So if you use something like a mini slim, that's 1.5 inches long, that's just a straight tail jig, that thing's going to fall like a rock compared to a stump bug that's got 3 tails on it and is going to drag in the water a lot more. So something else to think about is the jig you're using, okay? But went to an 1/8 ounce jig, all right? Was able to get down a little faster to the brush piles, but still not get hung. So that was the thing. Ow, good night. Those are sharp. Hi-ya, yow. Hey, if you wonder if Lightwire hooks are sharp, that one got me right in the end of the finger. Youch. All right. So what I was saying, now that I'm not hurt, there was a trade-off before LiveScope when we went to an 1/8 ounce jig. Okay, so if you don't have LiveScope and you want to go fish brush, an 1/8 ounce jig, you're going to get hung more than if you're throwing a 1/16. Why is that? Well, it's simple. Because, you cast over a brush pile, first of all, it's falling quicker. Okay? Second of all, if your jig, let's say you got a limb, your jig comes and falls over that limb, and you're dragging that jig, and that 1/8 ounce hits that limb, it takes more to pop that jig over that limb with an 1/8 ounce than it does a 1/16 ounce. So a 1/16 is going to roll over that limb a lot easier. I said 30 seconds going to roll over that limb a lot easier. Okay. An 1/8 ounce is going to drag more on that limb and you're going to get hung a lot more. It's just simple math. All right. So keep that in mind. A heavier jig, you're going to get hung and brush more. Now, why do I say that there was a trade-off to the 1/8 over the 1/16? Well, I could fish it a little faster. Okay. I could fish a little bit. I could get down to the brush a little quicker, and I could throw it further. And when we were fishing out in those open water situations with current, all right, so you got current out in open water. You're fishing out in open water in the main channel. A lot of times in these East Tennessee lakes, they're river lakes. You've got current coming down these river lakes. They're reservoirs that are man-made by dams. They dammed up the river, but there's still flow. We still have flow in our lakes. And a lot of times you've got flow in the main river channel. So when you're out there in the main river and you're fishing that flow, a heavier jig head gets you down there quicker, and that current doesn't affect your jig as much. There's days where we have to cast 50 foot past a brush pile for that jig to fall in the brush pile, directly in the brush pile, by the time it gets down to depth. So with a little heavier jig head, I didn't have to throw as far past the brush pile, and I could get down there and count that jig down and get in that brush a little quicker. This is all before LiveScope. I keep saying that, but I want you guys to know this was before LiveScope. So, you cast out, you count it down to 12. At 12, you're somewhere in that 18-foot range, and you start cranking. You start reeling. You start your slow, steady retrieve. Now, another trade-off that's not always great with a heavier jig is if you feel something on the end of that jig. Let's say you feel a light bump, or you feel it touch a jig or touch a limb or something, and you stop because you think, wait, was that a fish? and then you reel a little bit, chances are you're going to fall deep enough. Because if you looked at your side imaging or your down imaging when you went over that brush pile and you threw a buoy out behind the boat and you knew that the top of that brush was 18 foot deep, and you feel the top of that brush and you stop, that's just enough with a heavier jig head, such as an 8, for it to fall down in that tree or in that brush pile or in that stake bed far enough to get hung. Okay? So that was an advantage to the 16th, but yet you're sitting there waiting on it for 16 seconds or 18 seconds to get it down to 18 feet instead of 12. So, you know, just things like that that we had to think about pre-LiveScope. You know, you guys that have LiveScope now, especially you guys that started crappie fishing with LiveScope, you know, you see posts online. Now, don't shoot me down when I'm preaching good. Bear with me. Don't start cussing me in the comments. But you guys that started with LiveScope, okay, are spoiled. Are spoiled. I'm sorry to tell you that. You're spoiled fishermen, okay? You can get mad at me if you want to. You can cuss me up and down after the live in some message or somewhere else. Don't put it in here right now because this is a family show. But you guys that started with LiveScope are spoiled. I'm telling you right now, you're spoiled, all right? And the reason is because you can see that brush and you can see your jig in relation to that brush, and you can keep your jig out of that brush. We didn't have that luxury back before LiveScope. So we fished on feel, and I tell people that all the time. They ask me, well, how do you know where to go? How do you know when to leave? How do you know when you're not catching the right fish on a brush pile? How do you know when an area of the lake is dead and you're not going to catch fish there? It's all feel, guys. It's feel that I learned pre-LiveScope. And when I say feel, it's literally a feeling. It's a feeling that I feel. I tell people, like, take the ACC tournament, for instance. This ACC tournament that just passed. Everybody was talking about going low, going low, going low, going low, going low, going low. There's probably fish low that haven't spawned. Low, 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 down the lake, down the lake, down the lake. I would agree. I'd agree 100%. Bottom of the lake is deeper, cooler, and probably hadn't spawned out. But I went low in practice. I got to practice for about 6 hours one day before the tournament. And I went low, and I just felt like it was dead. I just had a feeling that there wasn't anything going on low that I wanted to be a part of, okay? So I stayed up. It paid off. We ended up winning some money. I was, won an hour, won $1,500. Happy-go-lucky, right? So caught tons of fish. Probably caught, well, we would have had a 14-pound bag with 7 fish. I mean, we caught a lot of fish, a lot of really, really nice fish. And we probably caught, I don't know how many fish we caught that day, a bunch. But I just had a feeling that wasn't the right way to go. It was just feel. So I say that because the way we used to fish was on feel, okay? So let me grab a rod here. So now you guys, and I say you're spoiled because, or the guys that have LiveScope and the guys that started with LiveScope are spoiled because now you cast out and you're reeling, okay? And you're reeling over that brush pile and you can literally see it on your screen. You go, oh, I gotta come up. Okay, now I can go back down. You know, you drop it back down. And you say, oh, I gotta come back up. Oh, okay, I can go down. You know, you can literally work your way over limbs, right? I mean, we didn't have that luxury back in the day. So we would literally cast out, okay? And for the sake of being able to actually demonstrate this, all right. So we would literally cast out. We'd count our jig down, 19, 20. All right, and we'd start reeling. And you'd feel bump, and you think, all right, was that brush or fish? That was brush. And you just roll that jig over top of it. You could feel it. You'd feel it get tight. You'd feel your line get tight, 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 tight. And when that jig rolled over the limb, it'd get loose again. Okay? That was a limb. And you're literally fishing by feel. And I feel like a lot of our anglers today have lost that feel or never learned that feel, right? Because they hadn't had to. They hadn't had to fish by feel. I think that's one thing that you can't teach. You can't talk. You can't get on a live and tell people how to feel fishing, how to feel crappie, how to feel, you know, what area of the lake is good, or what section you want to be in, or what brush pile you should fish or leave, or, you know, if you pull in a creek, you feel the fish that, you know, that they're there, they're not there, they're active or they're inactive. It's just a lot of things that anglers pre-LiveScope had to be aware of. You know, you go into a creek and you see bait flipping everywhere. Well, obviously, if there's bait flipping everywhere, there's fish in there feeding, right? You know, but if there's not bait flipping everywhere, how to tell active versus inactive fish, how to look at your graph and know, or your down imaging, your side imaging, and know if those fish are active without stopping on a brush pile. I used to take people out on trips, and I'd go over a brush pile and say, "You're not going to catch those fish. They're not active." "Are you sure?" "Well, we can fish them if you want to." "Well, there's a bunch of fish there." "Okay." We throw a buoy out and we turn around and fish for 10 minutes and never catch one. We go over another brush pile and I'm like, "Those fish are active." "How do you know?" "I can tell. I can feel it. I just know. I can look at that screen and I got that feeling that they're active." And they're like, "Yeah, okay, whatever." And I'm like, "All right." And we'll just catch 10 or 15 right in a row. So there's a lot of that unfortunately we've lost over the years with LiveScope. And that's okay. You know, hey, as long as your LiveScope doesn't go out, you're good. You know, just make sure your screen never craps out, or your transducer never craps out. But I say all that because, you know, I went from the 32nd, the 24th, and the 16th up to an 8th. And the 8th was more or less, again, because we moved offshore further. We needed to get down to the brush quicker. We had current that we introduced into all that. So that 1/8 ounce allowed us to be a little faster and a little more efficient and catch a few more fish. Okay. And we could keep everything kind of right in front of us, and we didn't have to, you know, make that huge long cast out there with the 16th ounce jig and it get pushed back 50 feet to the brush pile before we were able to get down there to it. All right, let's see what we got here. I know you probably got some comments on here. Rex Williams, what's going on? Ashley Coffee, hello, hello. Family and I are doing well, Ronald. Thank you. Hello, Matt. Let me introduce myself to you. I'm Derek Paget, along with Russell Odom, that are taking on the Lightwire Hooks business from my good friend Curtis Hobbs. What's going on, buddy? Glad you're on tonight. Thank you very much. And thank you all for taking on the Lightwire Hooks business, because I love Lightwire hooks. Like I said, I've been using them for, well, Curtis will tell you, a lot of years. And I've ordered a lot of hooks from him. So I appreciate you guys for what you do, because a good hook that is customized to my needs the way I like to fish it is hard to find. Okay. So I appreciate you guys. Thank y'all for doing what you do. And I look forward to our relationship moving forward. That's for sure. Hey, Matt, have you ever changed the head unit on the Ultrex trolling motors? I had to. Mine wouldn't hold spot lock. When you hit the spot lock, it would turn to the left and just go back and forth. I have. Yeah, I've seen that before, Jeff. It happens. I mean, these are electronics, okay? Everybody thinks that, you know, they buy an electronic, they put it on their boat, it's going to work forever. Well, unfortunately, they don't. They get bugs, and they crap out on us, too. That's a Lowrance HDS Gen 1. I have 8 of these now. And this is a Lowrance HDS Gen 1 8-inch that I have, I think, a dozen of now. So if this one craps out or this one craps out, I have a lot of replacements to replace them with. Anybody that has a Lowrance HDS 10 Gen 1 or 8 Gen 1 that wants to get rid of those, holla at your boy, because I will buy them and I will put them in a box with the rest of them that I have over here, because I love these units and I'm going to run them till I die. That's just how it is. All right, so that's my spiel for the unit thing. But I love my Lowrance HDS Gen 1s. The Gen 1 is my go-to. So, hey, Matt, hope all is, and I installed Marine Electronics, and even all the brands, Lowrance, Humminbird, Garmin. I install all the new stuff, the newest, latest, and greatest. Got to take some 86 16s out the other day and play with them, and I would still have these units, obviously, because they're on my boat, right? Hey, Matt, hope all is well. Any fishing reports for Douglas? Going to be in Flat Creek area next week from Alabama. Well, I will, Lund, because I have a guide trip up there Sunday. So don't really have a whole lot for you right now, but Sunday I will be up there. So don't know when you're coming, but maybe next Wednesday I can give you a fishing report because I'll be up there this weekend. Lonnie Hall, what's going on? George says 132nd on docks. No scope for me is the best time for me. Yep, that's exactly right. All right. So don't forget, mine has Wired for Crappie merch available. Yes, I do. Merch is on the website, wiredforcrappie.com. So if you had checked out wiredforcrappie.com, you need to go to the website and check it out because I'm pretty proud of my website. I pretty much like my website. It's pretty nice little website, if I do say so myself. Not because I built it or nothing, but it's a pretty nice little website. It's got some good pictures on it for sure. But you know, what do I know? I mean, I just put the backgrounds on it and put all some pictures on there, and who knows? But yeah, check it out. See if you like it. Let me know. Wiredforcrappie.com. All right, so let's get back to our jigs. So again, 1/8 ounce. We transitioned kind of into an 1/8 ounce. Still used a lot of 16ths, especially when there wasn't a whole lot of current present, and we were fishing anywhere north of 20 feet. The 1/8 ounce really came into play a lot more when you got deeper than 20, but the deepest that we fished at that time was probably about 25. We really didn't venture out past 25 feet a whole lot. Okay. Every once in a while, well, two reasons we didn't. Okay. Every once in a while, we would venture out a little past 25, but 30 was it. I mean, you might find a little brush pile or something in 30 feet, but a couple reasons why we didn't venture out past 25 feet. One, because it was very difficult at that depth to really be effective casting in that depth without LiveScope, pre-LiveScope again. It was hard to be effective casting to that depth, getting your jig, presenting your jig to a fish on a piece of structure that deep. That was kind of reason one. Reason two, you didn't have to. You didn't have to go deeper than 25 feet. Why didn't you have to? Because there wasn't anybody out there fishing that stuff. There wasn't people out there fishing, 20, 25 foot structure out in the main lake, sitting out there where you're, can barely see shore on that side of the lake and barely see shore on that side of the lake. And you're out there in no man's land fishing like in Egypt. And people are driving by you down the main river going, what in the world is that dumb doing? What is he fishing for? That guy must just be having lunch. There wasn't anybody out there fishing that stuff because they didn't have LiveScope and most of them couldn't go out there and fish that stuff. Okay. So you didn't have to go any deeper than that. You didn't have to go deeper than 25 feet. You could fish 18 to 25 feet. People used to ask me all the time, if you had one depth range to fish year round, what would it be? I told them 18 to 25 feet. You can go back and watch lives that I did when we first started this channel. 18 to 25 feet. I'd tell you all the time, 18 to 25. That was before everything 25 and shallower got absolutely throttled by every LiveScope that's on the lake. And if you think for 1 second that it hadn't affected crappie fishing, LiveScope hadn't affected crappie fishing, you have bumped your head and fallen upon blind, deaf, whatever you want to call it, eyes, ears, noses, mouths. It has affected crappie fishing. Now, listen to me. It hasn't decimated the crappie population. There are more fish in the lake than there ever were, and there will continue to be fish in our lakes, okay? But what it has done is change the patterns of those fish extremely, okay? The fish don't set up the way they used to. That 18 to 25 foot of water that we used to love and we used to cherish and we used to fish every single time we went to the lake has changed. They're not there anymore. When they do go there, well, let me take that back. They're still there. They just get picked off it all the time. You go to these brush piles now and there's a bunch of little fish. And everybody says, ain't nothing but little ones, ain't nothing but little ones. Yeah, it's because every LiveScope in the lake stopped there just about an hour ago and they caught everything off of it that could keep. And once they started catching the little fish, they left. You know, go back there 6 hours from now, you'll catch 2 keepers. And tell me I'm lying. Tell me I'm lying. Tell me I'm wrong. Somebody comment on this thing, because used to, you could go to a brush pile in 18 to 25 foot of water and you could catch 30, 20, 10, 18, something fish, keepers off a brush pile. Now you're lucky to catch 2 to 4. And then you got to go to the next one. You'll catch 2 to 4. You got to go to the next one. You'll catch 2 to 4. You got to go to the next one. You're running around like a chicken with your head cut off to catch 30 fish, but you can still do it. You just got to move around a lot more if you're going to fish that 18 to 25 foot water. If you're going to fish any shallower than that during the spawn, you can still catch a bunch off stuff because they're moving around and they're loading up on brush, and there's still times of year you can catch them. But post spawn, fall, you go fish those 18, 25 foot brush piles, you're going to catch fish. Don't get me wrong, but you're not going to load them down like you used to. Okay. I'm talking old days. I'm talking old school. All right. So again, 18 to 25 foot was about as deep as we ever fished. Okay. The LiveScope came out. All right. LiveScope comes out, and all of a sudden, we get LiveScope on the boat, and stuff starts changing. All right. So this box right here. All right. That 16 ounce, 24 ounce, and 32nd ounce box, I may leave at the house. I may as well leave at the house. I may as well just take this thing right here and just chunk it over there and just leave it alone. All of a sudden, I stopped using them. And about the only time I get back in that box is, well, let's face it, I don't shoot docks much anymore. I should, but I don't. A lot of the reason I don't is because used to, people couldn't get into there to those areas on a dock where the fish were setting because they couldn't go by a dock with their side imaging and actually see those fish under there. So they didn't fish docks a whole lot. But then LiveScope comes out. All of a sudden, you can take that LiveScope, you can shine it, and you can say they're in that corner beside that pole, 4 foot deep. And they can shoot right in there and catch them. Okay? So all of a sudden, your docks are getting pressured more. All right? So I don't shoot docks a whole lot anymore. Because you can go catch fish off docks, but it's just like 18 to 24 or 25 foot brush piles. Little fish, little fish, little fish, little fish. Every once in a while, you'll catch a big fish. But mostly little fish, little fish, little fish. Okay? Don't get me wrong. Plenty of fish left in the lake. Plenty. But when you pressure these areas as much as we do now with LiveScope, you catch those bigger fish. It takes a little while for another big fish to move in there that you can keep. And they don't necessarily move in there in droves. They move in there 1 or 2 at a time, 3 at a time, 8 at a time. That's my opinion. But I stopped fishing docks a lot. And I stopped that 16th ounce, 24th ounce, and 32nd ounce box. Has just been, I may as well write trolling box on top of it and leave it with the trolling rods at the house. So, but when LiveScope first came out, okay, that 1/8 ounce came into play a lot more. So I started using that 1/8 ounce a lot more. Not only for brush, but also for vertical jigging, okay? A lot of vertical jigging and a lot of casting open water fish. I mean, all of a sudden, open water fish comes into play to the point where, you're looking at the fish out there. You can see the fish out there. You know exactly the depth that fish is sitting at. You know exactly how deep you need to go. And with the ACCs and the flugers and the bonehead tackle, and I mean, you can lay it in their mouth. I don't need for it to fall slow because I'm not waiting for that fish to react. I can see that fish react. I can put that jig right in front of that fish and I can reel it right over top of his. I can cast out there and I can watch that jig fall. And when that jig gets 2 feet above that fish, I can reach down and flip that bail and I can take my slack out. I can literally pendulum that jig right over top of that fish's head and wait for him to react to it. And when he starts to react, I can reach down and start reeling. and thunk, wow, and I can let that fish have it. I don't need to wait on a reaction strike. I can now induce a reaction strike. I can make that fish react. I can take that jig and lay it in his nose and get him to bite. Okay. So that 1/8 ounce all of a sudden got used a ton. All right. Most all of my rods when I first got LiveScope and on brush piles. Okay. On brush piles, I could see those limbs. Now I can see the limbs. I can work my jig. I can take these 1/8 ounce jigs and I can work a brush pile, okay, and not get hung. So why do I need to wait for it to fall? So we pretty much went all 1/8 ounce, okay? And then, all right, so that's LiveScope phase 1. LiveScope phase 2, all of a sudden, we are realizing the pressure on these fish has started to push them. They've started to push. They've started to move. These fish have started to relate to different structure. They've started to go deeper. Okay? And all of a sudden, you're starting to see floating fish that aren't floating in 5 feet of water anymore. Now they're floating in 50 feet of water. I've literally been catching floating fish in 50, 60, 70 feet of water, setting 4, 5, 8, 10 feet down, out in the middle of friggin' nowhere, just sitting out there like a little ball of fire out there on your LiveScope, you know. And again, as this progresses and as this LiveScope gets more and more common, these fish are getting more and more skittish of what I would consider the pinging of your LiveScope, the pressure they feel in their lateral line from your boat pushing through the water, the sound from your trolling motor, the vibration from your trolling motor in their lateral line. They all start feeling this. Fish have a lateral line that runs right down the middle of their body. Basically, let's call it a backbone. It's not really the backbone, but it's right there. It's right there on the same plane as it. And they feel vibration with that. They feel big fish coming towards them. They feel predatory fish. They feel your boat coming. They your trolling motor's making noise. They feel all this stuff coming towards them. Eventually, they start relating all this to danger. Right? It's just like a deer in the woods. A deer in the woods, he smells a human. His buddy gets shot and falls over dead. The next time he smells a human, he ain't standing there. He gone. He gone, baby. I gone. Okay? It's just the same thing for fish. I mean, they start relating this to danger. Danger. Okay? They feel boats coming. Danger. They feel that pinging from that LiveScope. Danger. They feel your trolling motor vibration. Danger. You jump down off the deck in your boat and it goes, and they feel that. And that ain't natural, man. That ain't. I don't normally hear that. That right there ain't natural. That's like somebody comes up on your front porch tonight, kicks your front door in. You're gonna know it ain't natural. You know what I'm saying? That front door don't normally sound like that. Okay, at midnight, that ain't natural. Get the pew pew. You know what I'm saying? So anyway, then all of a sudden, we start introducing let's see, where's that? All right, then we start the 3/16. Okay, that's the ACC Crappie Sticks 3/16. That doesn't stop there. Then we get over into the 1/4 ounce. All right, that is a 1/4 ounce aspirin head. All right, now I used to be a round head guy. If you look in my 32nd ounce, 24th ounce, and 16th ounce box, it's all round heads. But when I started getting up in these bigger heads, okay, I started realizing that an aspirin head gives me a lot better profile. It's not as wide, okay? So I use an aspirin head anytime I get above an 1/8. Now, my 1/8 ounce heads are still round, I still prefer a ball head when it goes to an 8, obviously. All right, there's a round head. That's a round ball. But anytime I get above an 8, I like an aspirin head because I feel like with a round head in a quarter, I get way too big a profile if I'm a fish and that's swimming towards me. Okay, let's say that's swimming towards me this way. I feel like a round head swimming this way is just too wide of a profile for my little crappie body, my little crappie jig body. Okay, so I go with an aspirin head in a quarter. That's the only reason. Okay, feel. All right, feel. I just got done talking about that. Feel. All right, so then the quarter ounce comes out and comes around, and you start seeing more and more guys using a quarter ounce, not only because the pressure has really pushed those fish out a lot deeper, but we're getting better and better at identifying those fish in open water, sitting on deep structure. We're able to make that cast. The fish are getting spookier, so we're having to cast further to them. So a quarter ounce, that's a quarter ounce tied on right there. Okay, quarter ounce head right there on a pumpkin chartreuse stump bug. My favorite fave. And for those that say the pumpkin chartreuse doesn't catch crappie, I want you to look. Just 1 second, okay? For Jimmy Pratt and them out there, look how tore up that jig is, my friends. All the fish that teeth that jig right there. Look at that. That's just a bunch of teeth marks is all that is. Look at that. Yeah, boy. Can't catch them on that color. You guys are nuts. All right. So, again, that quarter ounce with those spookier fish, deeper fish. 1, sinks faster, gets down there quicker. 2, you've been dragging that on the shop floor. Sandpaper. And I can cast it further. Okay, that's a big part of it, guys, is I can take that quarter ounce head and I can sling that quarter ounce head. I can send it out there 60, 70 feet in front of the boat with a pretty good little cast. I don't have to rear back and just chunk it, but I can send it out there 60, 70 feet on just a decent cast. As a matter of fact, a lot of times, because I use a fishing specialties pole, so I'm moving my pole around and I'm identifying those fish in those little structures that I want to cast to. And a lot of times I'm shooting that quarter ounce. So I'll have that jig right here ready, and I'll be holding it in this hand, okay? So what I'll do, for the sake of showing you guys, is I'll actually take this jig, get a little line out, and I'll hold it. I need a little more. All right. So I'll actually take this jig and I'll hold it in my hand, right like that, in one hand, okay, my right hand. And I'll take that pole and I'll look for fish, okay? And when I find a fish, boom, there he is right there, okay? That pole's set right there. I'll reach up, I'll grab my jig, I'll take it in that rod back, boom, and I'll shoot right down my pole because I got my pole sitting right here, okay? So I'll take that jig and I'll hold it in my hand, and I'm looking, and then I see a fish, boom. All right, boom. I'll shoot that jig out there, and I'll commence to catching that fish, okay? So quarter ounce is probably it's getting to be my go-to. So all these guys that are out there fishing open water, myself included, pretty much have all went to quarters. And you cannot drop a quarter ounce jig on top of a fish that's any shallower than 10 feet. I'll tell you that. You better put it past him, because if you drop it right on his head, you're spooking him. Quarter ounce hits the water, and it's like they have a sixth sense about that quarter ounce jig hitting the water. They hear it, they feel it, something. But when it hits the water, and then when it hits the water out in front of your boat, you hear it. You know, you're like, dadgum, I just threw a bomb out there, you know. Actually, it's like throwing a rock. You ever pick a rock up, throw it in a puddle? You know, that's like a quarter ounce, you know. You shoot that baby out there, it hits the water, and it's like, Or like Kung Fu Panda. Who has kids out there? Kung Fu Panda. Skadoosh. Kung Fu Panda, baby. We're going to call it the Skadoosh jig head. Hey, Google Kung Fu Panda, okay? It's a real thing. He grabs a hold of somebody's finger and he goes, Skadoosh. That's how he sends them back to the nether realm. Skadoosh. All right, I'm getting in the weeds. I have kids. Sorry. So, anyway, quarter ounce is becoming my go-to jig head. Now, with that being said, in the spring, I had several guide trips that we did fish shallow brush. We did go back to that 16th ounce. You cannot go throw a quarter ounce jig head in 12 foot of water or less. You can't do it. All right. But in today's world with LiveScope and those fish being pushed or pressured out deeper and deeper to where they're not being pressured, it's getting to be the norm. It's getting to be the go-to. Okay. For a lot of you guys, I hear more and more stories. I just had a guy in here earlier that picked up his boat, and he said, man, he said, I make my milk run and I don't catch any fish anymore. He said, I'm starting to get discouraged. And I said, well, what do you mean your milk run? He said, well, I put in at so-and-so, and I go out, and I've got all these brush piles on this side, and I've got some brush piles over here, and then I work my way out deeper, and if I don't find anything by the time I get to the mouth of my creek, it takes me about 2 hours, and I go home. And I'm like, well, why don't you start at the mouth of the creek and go out and take 2 hours? And he's like, I'm not going out there. I'm not going deep. I'm not interested in doing it. And I said, well, then you better be interested in eating beef, because the more live scopes that get on the lake, I'm telling you guys, the more of that structure in that shallow depth and those mid-range and shallow depths are going to get hit. The more they're going to get abused, the more those fish are going to see a jig, the more they're going to get picked clean, the more they're going to get fished, okay? So I see that transition in crappie fishing and transition in crappie fishing already happening, and it's going to continue to happen and continue to get, I'm not going to use the word worse and worse, because it's not really bad. It's not a bad thing. It's just you have to keep up with the fish. You have to know where the fish are going and what they're doing and why. Okay? So that's all it is. All right, let's see what we got. Next comes tungsten to have a heavier, more compact jig. Sometimes I look at my jig and it looks like I'm fishing with a sucker or lollipop. Yeah, it can look that way. I mean, here's a good example is, this stump bug that I just showed you guys. I mean, look at this thing. Now, keep in mind that is what we're seeing, okay? That's what we're seeing on the top side looking at the jig, all right? So you got a big old head that is in front of that jig. But keep in mind, that's not what most of your crappie are seeing, because crappie feed up and we keep it above their head, right? So what crappie are seeing is this when it's coming through the water. Because when that's coming through the water, they're looking up at it and they're seeing that right there. That's what that crappie is seeing. Keep that in mind, okay? That right there is what that crappie is seeing. Nothing more, nothing less. Now, if you somehow take it right by that fish and he sees it from that profile, then yeah, that's what he's seeing. But for the most part, that is what the fish looks up and sees. Okay? When you're choosing colors, keep in mind that is what the fish is most of the time going to see. Little wired tip. I used chartreuse on bottom and red on top. Well, I caught him chartreuse on bottom and blue on top. Well, I caught him chartreuse on the bottom and black on top. Well, it's because the fish are mostly seeing the bottom of your jig. All right. Surprising having switched to lighter jig 1/16 and 1/32 with split shots because I like the way it floats pendulums over brush piles. Yeah, so again, a lot of guys are doing that. Now, let me explain to you why I don't do that. Let me explain to you. Burn unit, listen real close. I'm going to explain to you why I do not do that. And you need to think about this. You need to consider this, okay? You're going to miss a lot of bites. You're going to miss a lot of strikes that way, okay? Well, why, wait a minute, Matt. Why am I going to miss strikes, okay? So let me see if I can't demonstrate this the best way I possibly can. All right, so you have a jig, okay? And you have a split shot right here where my fingers are, okay? All right, split shot. The line that comes from that split shot to your rod, you have direct contact with, right? Because that's the first weight in your series. When you do not have direct contact to this jig and your line is loose, which is your pendulum, like you're talking about, you got loose line, you got tight line from your split shot to the tip of your rod, loose line from your split shot to your jig. This falls, okay? This pendulum's, if that fish comes up and strikes it, a lot of times you're going to miss that strike because you're not going to feel it, especially if you're using mono. If you're using monofilament or fluorocarbon, you are definitely not going to feel that strike, okay? Braid, you can sometimes get through the split shot. But if you're putting a split shot in your line above your jig, you do not have direct line contact to your jig. So you will miss strikes, especially light bites. You get on a day where they're biting light, you will not feel that bite, especially deep light bites. Okay? And I don't, okay, so you're using braid. That's good. That helps. But even with braid, you're still not going to feel a lot of bites because your direct contact is to your split shot, not your jig. So I challenge you, maybe get away from that, because here's the alternative. You say you like the pendulum. Okay, that's great. I love the pendulum too. Trust me. You can create that pendulum yourself with your rod tip. Okay? So if you cast out, you make that cast. Okay? You always hear what? Rod tip down, rod tip down, rod tip down, right? Bear with me. Okay? You make that cast. You're watching your jig fall. Rod tip up as that jig falls. All right? That jig gets 2 feet above that fish or 3 feet above that fish. Close that bail. Take your slack out. Once your slack is out, your rod tip's up. Then all you have to do is lower that rod tip just so slightly. Just lower it slow. Lower, lower, lower. And it pendulums. Okay? You don't need the split shot. Get rid of the split shot. You're missing bites. You're missing strikes, especially the deep ones or the light ones. I'm telling you. I promise you are. I guarantee it. I had a guy that asked me the same exact question about 3 or 4 months ago. Why don't you use a split shot? And I explained it to him. And he said, that is amazing. He said, I always wondered why I kept missing bites because all of a sudden I would have a fish on that I never felt. And I never really put 2 and 2 together until you said that. I'm going to get rid of my split shot. A month later, he came back and thanked me and said, I am absolutely thrilled I got rid of that split shot because I feel everything now because I'm directly contacting the jig. I'm connected. It's the word I was looking for. I'm directly connected to my jig now, so I feel everything. All right? So that's another little wired tip for you tonight. Y'all got some good ones tonight. I got to admit, you got some good tips tonight. Get rid of the split shot. Try it. Just try it, please. I know that means you have to have, a lot of different jig heads. I'm sorry, but I'm telling you, you'll enjoy the feel that you get getting rid of that split shot. Okay. And like I said, you can create that pendulum. You can create that pendulum by yourself. Close that bail, let that jig fall, let that jig fall, let that jig fall, rod tip down, rod tip down. Then when you pendulum past where you want, or pendulum where you want to pendulum to, just start reeling. And you can start that slow, steady retrieve. Okay. So you can come down and you pendulum. Well, I need to go the other way. You pendulum. Then, all right, he sees it. Whoop, start that slow, steady retrieve. Whack! He hits it. Okay? So give it a go. You can create that by yourself. You don't need the split shot. I do that with my long rod on open singles where I can raise the slack up as it gets to the fish using hair jigs, by the way. Yeah. So, Matt, what about braid and a bullet weight and top and bottom bobber stops versus a split shot? Same thing. It's the same thing. You don't have direct contact to your jig. I don't want anything in my line that is going to take direct contact away from my jig. Okay. If I need to slow my fall down, I can slow my fall down with my rod tip. I don't need a light jig and a split shot or a bullet weight, or because you're pegging it. I mean, you're pegging it with, and that's even worse because you got two bobber stops, one above and one below. What do they put, George? Have you ever shot a bow? What do they put on the limbs of your bow? Jimmy, you can answer this question. What do you put on the limbs of your bow to dampen the shock on your bow? Dampeners. What are dampeners made out of? Rubber. And you're taking two rubber bobber stops and putting them in between a weight. What do you think it's doing? It's dampening your feel. It's dampening the vibration that's going to come back up your line when a fish hits. There's no way. No way. I want direct contact to my jig, period. If y'all walk away here tonight with anything, one thing, please do not put anything above your jig that is going to dampen the vibration that comes through your line, up your rod, down your rod, and to your hand. Okay? Because it's hard enough when you're down there fishing deep or far out. I mean, we're having to cast a fish at 50 feet. I don't know how anybody could feel a fish bite 50 feet with anything in between their jig and their tip of their rod. I just don't know how y'all do it. I like to think I got pretty good feel, and that bonehead tackle braid is sensitive, but I don't want anything to take away from that bite because that one light nip from a 2-pounder, and yes, 2-pounders nip, let me tell you, that one light nip that I miss could be a fish that wins me a tournament. Could be a fish that, wins me $1,500 at the ACC tournament. So, no, I want direct contact to my jig for sure. Limb savers. Yep, that's right. Do you use a leader or straight braid? This rod has a leader on it, but I don't always tie leaders. I sometimes tie them and sometimes I don't. And I have fished them both ways. Most of the time on a guide trip, I do not tie a leader. Okay. I hardly ever tie a leader on a guide trip because I like getting my jigs back when we get hung, and we get hung a lot on guide trips. So I can tie straight braid. We catch just as many fish, and I can pull jigs out of brush and not break off and have to retie all day long. So straight braid on guide trips. I do sometimes in tournaments tie a fluorocarbon leader just because I feel better about it sometimes. Sometimes I don't. Just depends. If I have time to tie them, I tie them. If I don't have time to tie them, I don't tie them because it doesn't bother me or doesn't bother fish. What are your thoughts on using weedless jig heads? What are your thoughts on using weedless jig heads while fishing brush piles, and how well do they keep you from getting snagged? They will help you. They will keep you from getting snagged. And Alex, um, I don't have a personally. This is just personal opinion. I don't like a weedless jig head. Okay, Lightwire hooks makes plenty of them, so I don't mind losing them. Um, and I don't necessarily like anything in between the fish's mouth and the business end of my jig, if you know what I'm saying. I don't want anything in between uh, the hook point and that fish. Not because I feel like I miss any fish with it, but just because there's the possibility that I might not get a hookup. So I don't typically go that route, but I learned to fish on feel, so I feel brush very well, or I feel like I do anyway. Who knows? Maybe I don't, but I feel like I feel brush very well, and I don't typically get hung. When I feel a limb, I typically know it's a limb, and I'm able to work that jig over that limb without getting hung in it. So for that matter, I don't like a weedless jig head because there is some type of um, uh, whether it be line, or sometimes it's like nylon, or sometimes you got a little wire keeper that goes over to the point of your hook. It's just something that's in between the point of that hook and the fish that I don't typically like. And that may be more of a mental thing for me, but I just don't want anything on in between the business end and the fish's mouth, you know? So that's me. Virgil, probably the most informative live I've watched. Thanks, Matt. Thanks, Virgil. I appreciate that, buddy. We're gonna start getting back into the informative stuff. There was a little period of time there where we talked a lot about what was going on with Wired and just shooting the breeze and talking to you guys. But we're gonna get back into some information stuff. I love talking information stuff. Like I said, we've been on over an hour tonight. Once I start talking informational, I get lost because I love it. I'm very detail oriented. I'm very in tune with my equipment and what it's doing and what's working and what's not working and how. And I nitpick everything down to the last little minute thing. So I love getting into it. I'll talk all night about it, which we've almost done. We've been on over an hour. So, but thank you. I appreciate it, Virgil. And I'm glad you think so. I'm glad you've got some good stuff out of it tonight for sure. What size braid do you like? So that's Bonehead Tackle. That is actually 12-pound braid. That is orange 12-pound braid from Bonehead Tackle. That is actually a 4-pound diameter, but it's 12-pound braid. Okay. All right. George, Virgil, you hit the nail on the head with that comment. He's on fire tonight. Well, thank y'all. I appreciate that. I really do. Crappie Cav. I like the Charlie Brewer weedless jigs for fishing brush. Yeah, they're good. I've used those before. They work well for sure. I always tell fishermen to fish around trash and fish deep. There you go. So I can't say it any better than myself. What's up, Mr. Curtis? We was talking about you earlier. I hope you was on or wasn't on, or if you wasn't or if he was. We was talking about you if your ears was burning. So we met your counterparts tonight. They were on here talking with us. We appreciate them for coming on, and I can't wait to have some conversations with those guys myself. So, but always glad to see you, Mr. Curtis. Hope you're doing well, and we appreciate you for everything you've done, do, and continue to do for the crappie fishing world. So thank you very much for that. And hey, looky here. I got my jigs. Got them. Oh, and I paid my bill, so it's a win-win because I paid my bill and got my jig heads. So I'm good on my end, and y'all should be good on your end, right? So I appreciate you very much. Always love. Oh, I didn't show y'all the other color that I got. So I got my June bug, but I also got my disco balls. All right. So I got my disco balls. There's my disco balls. Boom. Check that out. Dun, 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 dun. That silver. Look at that silver. Oh, it's pretty. Pretty, pretty. With a red eye. Watch out now. All right. So we've been on Mr. Russell. Mr. Curtis, Curtis is the GOAT. I almost said Mr. Curtis is the Gert. I flipped those around. It's my dyslexia coming out. All right. So Mr. Curtis is the GOAT. There's no doubt about that. And I appreciate my relationship with Mr. Curtis. And I better not lose my relationship with Mr. Curtis now that Mr. Curtis is slowing down on the Lightwire side. I better continue to have I know I'll continue to have my relationship because I'm going to call you and bug you. And hopefully I can get back down to Blackshear and do some fishing here in the next little bit. So I ain't coming down right now because it's hotter than Hades down there right now. I live down there. I know it's too damn hot to come down there right now. And that's for a lack of better terms because I don't have another one. It is hot down there right now, and we're not going to do that. So I'll get down there, but it's going to be fall before I get down there because I ain't coming down there. And there is no other way to put how hot it gets at Lake Blackshear this time of year other than the way I put it. Okie dokie? Okie dokie. All right, so let's see. Greatest of all time. There's no doubt about that. George, have a good week. Oh, God bless. Yep, God bless to everybody. I hope you guys have a great week. And I appreciate everybody for watching. And like I said, if you got something from tonight's live, do me a favor. Share the live so that everybody else can get it too. There's a share button on YouTube. There's a share button on Facebook. There's a share button anywhere you look at stuff. So please do me a favor. There's been up to 80 people watching tonight. Do me a favor. Hit the share button and share it with somebody else so that somebody else can get it too. Crappie fishing is exploding. There's a lot more guys crappie fishing than there used to be. And I would love to get to reach more people that can come back and say, I learned something too. Thank you. And I'm catching more fish now because I got this from your channel. That's what it's all about. So if you would, smash that share button and share it. And let people know you learned something from it. Let people know, hey, at minute number 64 or 37 or 88 or whatever it is, or 1 hour and 12 minutes like we've been on now, whatever it is, when you learned, let them know you learned. Let them know you got good stuff out of the live, and we'll get more people on the live. You know what I'm saying? More people means more comments, which means somebody might ask a question that might help you. You know what I mean? So more people we get, the better. We're going to get informative. We're going to keep it informative, and we're going to keep on going. So next week, I've already got a topic that I'm looking forward to talking about next week that's going to be informational. I'm not going to tell y'all what it is, but it's going to be good stuff. So make sure you tell a friend. And I appreciate you guys for watching. As always, God bless. I appreciate y'all for all you do. We'll catch you on the next one. See you guys.